Okay, so today we're going to have a continuation on declaring PLSQL variables, and already recording this particular session. So we did actually a bit of introduction to PLSQL, and I think this is actually like the third lesson. So up to now, I know we are somewhere in at least getting to know what PLSQL is. So I'm going to pick from where we stopped yesterday about declaring PLSQL variables. And for this case, when we talk about declaring, because we have two words here, we have declare variable at the same time initialize a variable. So the very first thing we're going to do is ensure that you start server output on. Then I'm going to give one example so that we can continue from, we can pick from there. And this example is going to be based on, I want to capture. So I can have declare. So I can have VF name. I'm going to have the voucher 220. And then I'll have begin. And then I'll have like select first underscore name into the underscore F name from employees, where employee underscore ID, we can give it 100, or we can just give like 126, I think it is there. And then DBMS underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket V underscore F name. That is actually the name of the variable. And then of course I will end / press enter. Yeah. So at this point, we have an employee whose employee ID is 126. The name is actually Irene. So what happens is, for this particular part, you can see that we have a variable, the declaration of the variable here, and I'm trying to capture some information coming from this perspective, or this DBMS, which is actually like an output generator. Now, so we did actually talk about how to declare a variable, and declaring a variable is just to mention, just to have a name that you can call it a variable. And then that name, the variable name, or the variable name we are having it here as P underscore F name, as also a name. It's actually called an identifier. So when you heard of PLSQL identifier, just automatically that is a variable name. And then this variable name should actually take in values which are of characters, data type. So we're using the data type voucher 2. So at this perspective, we have not actually initialized. We have not actually initialized the variable. But what we've done, we've actually declared the variable. We've actually declared the variable. Now we also have this scenario. And so we can have like vname, and then we can have like voucher 220. And then I can talk about begin. And then I can talk about VF name and put a full colon equals to, and I can have it as Sami with a semicolon. And then I have the DBMS, of course, coming from this first point. And then I can change that, press enter, semicolon, press enter, and /. Now, look at the differences between them. This one, let's not actually look at the entire code. I want us to look at specifics. Here, I have declared a variable, and I have not assigned any name to this particular variable. Now, what this variable has to do is just to capture information or name coming, the first name of an employee whose employee ID is 126. So it is going to be captured here and then placed where? Then it is actually pushed forward to be stored under the variable. So for this case, we've only declared the variable. We've not actually initialized the variable. Although the initialization part here is indirect, it's not direct compared to the second what? Compared to the second code here. So if you look at the second one, we've declared a variable which is VF name. Of course, this is a declaration. And when we directly assign a value to that particular variable with the help of the dollars, the full colon equal sign, this now becomes the initialization. So at this point, we can say that the variable has been initialized because the name or the string or the character string has been assigned to that particular variable. So we all know that VF name as a variable contain a name, and the name is Sami. So when we use now the output generator here, we are able now to get or to capture information coming from that particular variable. So that is the differences between declaring a variable at the same time initializing a variable. Now, so today we're going to move forward, although we should actually get ourselves, acquaint ourselves with the information of declaring and initializing a variable. And I want us to see other information, because here we want to understand how we can declare variables. And remember, we talked about, of course, we've introduced variables, and we want to examine variable data types. Of course, if you are interested at ensuring that you come up with just by using an example here, let's say, for example, VF name, I can decide to have to capture character, you see? So that's why I'm using varchar2. Now, if it is vsal, ensure that this number, you see, you can capture. So it means that for this particular variable, we are now acquainted, or it means that this particular variable called vsal has to capture data which is of number data type. If I change that, let's say to v higher, and then put it date, so it means that this particular variable is supposed to capture the higher date. For example, I can just give a random declare. We want one to capture the last name. Let's say VL name. We have varchar220. We have vsal, that is to capture what? Number. And then we have vhigher. Now it doesn't mean that you're supposed to put v, but you can just put higher, just the name you want. So you can see that these three variables means that each one has to capture a value, and these values are of different data types. So if we come down here and execute, so I want to select, I will select, the first one is supposed to capture the last name. The second one is supposed to capture the salary. The third one is supposed to capture hire date. Into what? Now the order comes on. So it means that the first select statement is the last name. So what happens is I have to have what? The first variable appearing, the second variable appearing, and then the third variable appearing from employees, where employee underscore ID equals to 126. So you can see that I am relating. I am starting with last underscore name, which is actually a character. It means that I have to connect it to a character variable. Then here I will come and use DBMS. So yes, here we can have VL name. Remember, you can also bring up like different output generators, so you can just use the same way we did yesterday. And then of course, the last one, you can just put higher. And then end with the semicolon at the end, then press enter and put /. So here it means that you are able to tune a variable to capture different data types, whether it's of character data type or number data type or date data type. So this means that if this code is okay, then we are able to use PLSQL block. For this case, we are talking about the anonymous block to capture information of an employee whose employee ID is 126. And the information are only three. We want the last name, the salary, and the hire date. So if I press enter, you can see that I am getting Mikilileni 2700, 28 September 06. Remember, here we queried first name. Here we queried first name for the same employee, and we're getting Irene. So it means that we are looking for the last name, and the results that we have down here is exactly, based on the last name. So this is about what declaring variables. So when you talk about the data types or trying to understand variable data types, we can work on that particular plan. Now, there's something I want to show you now. There's something I need again to show you based on the variable data types. Based on the variable data types, we have something called percent type. Is an attribute. Is an attribute. Now, when you talk about this particular attribute, the percent type, and I want you to take it seriously, like just understand this percent type. If in case you want to build or you want to write down an anonymous block and you don't know exactly what the data type for that particular variable is, you see, you are not sure, you're not as sure of the data type. For example, if I can give you password, you see, for password, you are not sure, is it a number data type or is it a character data type? Because I can have my password as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see, that is number. I can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then TY, and then even put that or that. You see, somebody can have either alphanumeric, that means your combination of numbers and letters, or you can also have pure what? Pure numbers. So for this one, you are not sure unless you go back and describe that particular table. But just to save time, we are introducing something called the percent type attribute. Now, this one means that if you are not sure of the data type to connect that particular variable to, then the system will adjust automatically for you. How do we do this? If you look at this point, if you look at this particular part, we all know that VL name is a variable, and we are attaching this particular variable to last underscore name. So automatically we know that it is voucher2. Last name, as you describe it, is voucher2. And even if I describe employees table here, you can see that we have the data types. Employee ID is a number. First name is a voucher. Last name is a voucher. Salary is a what? Is a number. Of course, hire date is a date. So what happens if you want to bring up the PLSQL block and you're not sure of the data type it should take? So if you are not sure of the data type it should take, just use what? Just use the percent type, and the system will automatically assign a data type for you. So for example, let's assume that we have first underscore F name. We know that it's a voucher, but I don't want, probably I'm not sure whether it's a voucher, or let me just put this. Let me put salary. You see, salary again is something that can be complicated. You don't know whether it is 1,000. You don't know whether it is let's say Kenya shillings 1,000, you see. So if you have Kenya shillings 1,000, this means that it's a combination of, it's an alphanumeric way of displaying salary. And 1,000 is just a numerical way. So if you want to probably get rid of the doubt whether the data type is this or that, just use percent type, and it will be safer for you. For example, let's have declare, and I want to probably capture. I want to like capture information coming from the first name and the salary, and even the date. Let's capture the same thing we captured here. Let's capture the same thing here. So here, I'm going to create a variable. This time around, let's call it fname. That is a variable that is supposed to capture first name. Now, if I put varchar, or varchar 220, automatically it's correct because I know first name is a character or is attached to a character data type. That means it's supposed to store character strings. Now, but still, I can just come and use percent type. Now, how do you use percent type? Using percent type means that you are supposed to write the variable name, and then instead of writing the data type because you are not sure, or even if you are sure and you want to just avoid any error that can be captured probably in the near future, just use this. We know that fname is a variable that is supposed to capture first name. Now, first name, where is it coming from? It's coming from employees table. So start from the table employees, then put dot. What is the name of the column we intend to capture? It is first underscore name, and then put percent type. So this is where the attribute comes. So it's like you're telling the system that this particular variable is supposed to capture information coming from, or is directly in line to capture information coming from a column called first underscore name coming from employees table, and of course the percent type attribute that connects both of them. So for this one, you will not have any error coming in. So fname is to capture first name. That's why we are bringing in between. If we had last name or lname, it means that we are looking for the last underscore name. So that is the first one. Then we have like sal. Sal is another variable. We need to attach again employees dot salary percent type. We need again to have let's say hire. Hire is for the hire date, employees dot hire underscore date percent type. So now you can see that the way I've scheduled this is different from this. Is different from this, because here I was directly linking them with the data type because I know automatically. So for the first one, if there's a problem, then the system is going to give an error. But for the second one, in terms of variable data types, it's going to be 100% sure. So for this one, if somebody actually key ins some information, or if the salary is being written in alphanumeric, that means you have the currency symbol and then the value, then it's going to be captured because already you've tell the system that regardless of the data type that it has, just define it for me. Then come down here and say begin. And then again, you can just select. This time round, we want to select, is it okay? First underscore name, comma, salary, comma, hire underscore date. Now, all these columns you have to know, like just write the same way it is written here. You see, when you describe a table, I'm writing exactly the way it is written. So last underscore name, first underscore name, hire underscore name, we have salary. So here means that the last is hire date into where? So here we are calling now the variables into fname, comma, sal, comma, hire from employees, where employee ID equals to let's say 100. And then of course I can just bring the DBMS. So I can just use the three of them. Fname, that is the first one, press enter. I want sal, press enter, and then I want higher. And then come and say end, and then do through that. So this is how to use the percent type. So if I press enter, automatically I'm going to get, I'm not getting an error, but I'm getting the exact values I'm looking for. So Stephen has an employee ID 100, salary is 24,000. Then the hire date, when was Stephen hired, is 17th June 03. And you've seen that I'm getting like successful PL skills procedure successfully completed. So here you have to take into account something called the percent type attribute, because it helps you to get rid of any doubt you have on the data types that are within that particular table column. So that is how to use what? This is how to use percent type. So for example, if I want to go to a different department, or let's have, for example, describe, let me repeat, departments. We have this table called departments. Probably I want to find the department name and the department ID, but I'm not sure whether department ID is a number or department name is a voucher too. So I want to get rid of that doubt. So what I will do, I'll just come and say declare. And then out of nowhere, I am supposed to come up with a name that suits to be a variable for me, attached or in line with that particular column. So here I can just take like DID. DID is like a variable that it's supposed to capture department ID. Or let's say department name, let's say DName. DName. So for this DName, I'm going to have, first of all, the rule is that start with the department, the table, departments, dot, then department underscore name, percent type. So you see DName, I intend this variable to capture information of a department name. So, and I am not sure whether it is voucher too. So I want the system to define it for me. Press enter, then I will begin. Then I'll say select department, now write in full, department name. And look at this, departments table. The table is called departments, not department. Into DName from employees, where not from employees, from departments, don't forget that, where department underscore ID equals to 90. So you have to at least have the knowledge of the department IDs that exists. So here we are looking for a name that is attached to a department whose department ID is 90. Then of course I will just rerun to capture the DBMS instead of typing it. And again, just know how to type this. It is DBMS underscore output dot put underscore, and we will get used to it as we move forward. So here it is DName. So I'll come end and then press enter. So you see now that I am having this. This one means the system will define for me the data type for that particular DName. So here the department ID attached to 90 is what? Is executive. Is executive. So that is just by using what? Percent type. That is just by using percent type. Now, this is all about declaring PLSQL variables. So we've seen just the normal way of declaring. We've seen how to initialize. And of course, we've seen how to now use the percent type in case you are not sure of what variable it is. And yeah, so we also have something else which is actually called bind variables. We have something called bind variables. Now, what is a bind variable? What is a bind variable? And of course, before even talking about bind variables, we have like two types of variables. We have like types of variables. Let me just mention them. We have like types of variables. Number one, we have, let's say, the PLSQL variables. And e.g., for example, we can talk about e.g. We have, like, for example, the Scala variables. Now, this is the case of like number, varchar2. You see, those that takes up those data types. You see, we are defining the variable based on the data types that are being taken in. And of course, we also have another one called composite variables, which we will come and talk about. So in short, whatever variables we've been using, we'll be using Scala variable or PLSQL variables that uses Scala data types, like number, varchar, date. Now we'll also talk about the composite variables later. These are attached to, for example, things like called the associative arrays and so many other things. That is number one. Number two, we also have something called non or non-PLSQL variables. We have none. So these are non-PLSQL variables. Non-PLSQL variables. Now this one means that we have only one, which is actually called the bind variable. So just to know, in PLSQL, we have like two subdivisions of a variable. We have PLSQL variable and we have a non-PLSQL variable. Or you can talk about the bind variable, and of course, different from the Scala variables or Scala data types variables. So here I want us to see, what is a bind variable? What is a bind variable? So you see, when it comes to this, like for example, the data types. For example, I've talked about the Scala data types. Scala data types, these are data types that hold a single value. You see, for example, when you talk about V and VF name, varchar2 20, it's supposed to capture only the first name. The VF name is supposed to capture the first name. VL name or L name, or yeah, whichever way you want to put it, it will hold that particular value. You see, higher was to capture higher date. Sal was to capture salary. So those are actually referred to as the Scala data types because they are attached to holding a single value. Now let's talk about the non-PLSQL variable. Now another name for bind variable is also referred to as host. You can have this name. Host variable or bind variable is actually the same thing. So we will encounter that as we move forward. Now, so something on bind variables, probably something to note. You see, the way we are defining or the way we are declaring a variable or assigning a name as we declare the variable, or having a name for a variable, ensure that you don't use any reserved keyword, or ensure that you don't use what? Exactly the column that already exists within the database. Now, what am I talking about? Let me show you this. Like I am looking for department name, and yet here I have what? Department underscore name. This one is wrong. I'm not going to get any information because I'm actually using a reserved word, which is not supposed to be a variable. So just use any other name or dname or name, but ensure that you connect it with the right column. So that is something that should be noted. Again, sometimes it appears here. You see, for example, I'm looking for I'm looking for D name. So somebody else can come here and say department underscore name. So you see, select department name into department name. This is wrong. So ensure that the variable is always something different, and it's not even part of the Oracle or the PLSQL reserved keywords. So you have to have your own name. Now, bind variables. Bind variables means that it's not actually like a PLS. It's not like the common PLSQL. Variables, but this one is totally different. Even the way we write them, even the way we execute, the way we write is totally different thing. But how we declare this bind variable is a different way again. We are supposed to start abnormally, like not the normal way of starting a variable or a common variable, but we are starting it differently. So what happens is when we talk about a bind variables, they are normally created within the same environment, or they are being created automatically there and then. Now, they are also referred to as host variables. Already I've talked about that. Now, if you want to create a bind variable, you are supposed to create with a what? Let me just have this. Let me just query this. If you want to create a bind variable, you have to start with the word what? Variable. So you create with the word variable. If you want to check the contents, or if you want to check the outcome, or to get the output of bind variable, you're supposed to use print. You're supposed to use print. So in this case, we can say that bind variables are variables that you create in a host environment. And host environment means it's actually the current session you're actually using, and you can execute it. It doesn't mean that it's supposed to come from somewhere else. No, you can run it the same way you want. And as you run this particular variable, as you run the bind variable, again, you're supposed to specify what are you going to capture within that particular variable. Are you going to capture a character? That means if it's a character, you're supposed to use varchar 220 or 30. But varchar 2 data type should be there. That means if you want to capture any character string, again, if you want to capture a number or an integer, just use number data type, and that becomes the easiest. So for this case, we can say that we want to capture the same information. So here I can say vname, fname, let's fname. I want to capture fname. Of course, this one is going to be what? This one is going to be varchar 2, let's say varchar 220. This is how to start, varchar 220. Now, then after that, if you press enter for this case, press enter, you see it's automatically takes us to the second line. Now, once it takes us to the second line, we are supposed to use the mandatory sections of an anonymous block. If you remember, we had a begin. Now, here declare is an optional thing. Here declare is an optional thing. So what happens is we are supposed now to select. What are we selecting? We are selecting first underscore name into fname. Now, the way we are putting fname into fname, this one means that we are putting it as a PLSQL variable. But in this case, you're talking about non-PLSQL variable. So in this case, we don't need to specify or put into just fname like that. We are supposed to bring in like a full colon. So this tells you that it is a bind variable. So automatically it will capture this variable from this point. So select first underscore name into full colon fname. Because that is the only variable we have, then we can talk about from employees where, let's say employee underscore ID equals to 126, although we into 126. into 126. 126 and press enter. Then from there, you just do what? You just end and press enter. I mean, press put a forward slash and press enter. Now look at this. This is automatically, it's a success. First of all, we've managed to create a bind variable, and we are not getting the results. Probably this is a question that you people are asking. We are not getting the results. So here it means that the variable is what? The variable is fname. The variable is fname. So how do we get the output here? So to get the output, I'm supposed to use the word print. Print what? Print fname. Press enter, and automatically you can see that we are getting who? We are getting Irene. So this one is, if I can repeat again, like variable. Remember this one we took a what? This one we took a character. So let me find the salary. So I can have like Sal. So Sal is my bind variable name. And then I expect to have like number, let's say 10, press enter. But for this case, we are having an issue here. We are having an issue here. Now, what's the difference between this? You see, when you assign a value to number, especially to variable, I mean to the number data type in the bind variable, if you assign the precision to the size, it's going to give you an error because it only requires you to have only the number alone. It's only the virtual 2 that you can be allowed to have a value as far as bind variables is concerned. So for this one, just use only number. Then let's say select salary into full colon sal from, let's say from employees where employee ID equals to 100. Now here we don't have any DBMS, we don't have any declaration. So we can just have sal, press enter, you can see we have 24,000. So for this special kind of variable, is actually called the non-PLSQL variable, we don't need to declare. So here declare has proved itself that it's an optional section. We also have like, I think we had like also something called an exception. Exception is also another optional. But what is mandatory is only the begin and end. So that should always be there. So here you find out that when we talk about bind variable, you know how to work with it or how to perform it. And you can still make it more complicated. You can still make it more complicated, just the same way you want it to be. For example, apart from, you see, apart from, let's say, for example, for this salary, for this particular salary, or even we know that we have two bind variables. We have, we had fname and now we have sal. Now, what happens if I can talk about print sal without a semicolon, press enter, you see I'm still getting what? I'm still getting the results. Again, I can still use this concept. I can just create a select statement and I want to find first underscore name. Okay, I don't know whether it will come up from employees where salary, instead of course, I want to have like 24,000 where salary is 24,000. And automatically we know that we have a bind variable here. So put that and put sal. Press enter. Now look at that. So this one can actually tell us how many people have a salary of 24,000. So through this part, we can actually get multiple values, Stephen, Christopher, and Lindsay. So you can actually use, find other information in reference to the bind variable, reference to the bind variables output. So again, if you want to find for the other, let's say I want to find the last name. I want to find salary. I want to find hire date and find whether he has a manager ID from, I want from F name, where, let's say first underscore name equals to F name. Look at that. I'm able to get this information. I'm able to get, remember this one is our bind variable, the first bind variable we had. And if you can remember, we did execute here, up here. This one, this is exactly what we are doing there. So you can just use two ways to get the output of a bind variable. You can use print keyword, print followed by the name of the bind variable. And again, you can just use a select statement just to get other information in reference to that particular bind variable. Now, so when declaring these variables, you have to know, are you operating from with the non-PLSQL variable, that is the bind variable, or you are operating from a different variable? So so what happens is we've actually managed to introduce what a variable is. I know up to now we know that a variable is just like a temporary container that holds values. And again, we've seen how to declare, we've seen how to declare, how to initialize, how to use percent type just to alter in case you have a doubt of the data type, or even if the data type will change in the near future to that particular column, the percent type will always take care of that. Now, so don't worry about the declaring variables, writing variables. We will write so many variables from, by the time we are done with PLSQL, we will be well versed with the variables, because that there's no way that you're going to avoid a variable. So that is exactly what we are doing. So yes, yesterday I know that I forwarded another YouTube tutorial, not YouTube tutorial, just tutorial on yesterday's class. And I think yesterday we did introduce declaring PLSQL block. Just like I wasn't there, I mean, in terms of power, that's why I had to record that class. So based on yesterday and probably the day before yesterday and today, any questions so far? Any questions so far? Anybody before we move to the next chapter? Did you guys try to go through yesterday's video? Brian, Daniel, Robert, Fred. Okay, so this one is an extension. So what I can just say is that PLSQL is not broad as such, but it needs time. It requires our attention, it requires our effort, because I know, yes, iko kidogo, but more concrete. So we need to understand as we move forward. Remember, this one matters a lot when it comes to developing apps, when it comes to developing application systems. So this is the sort of programming language that operates at the back end. So when it comes to like when the time comes for us to work on the front end, now to design, to be creative or use even images and all that, we should be able or well versed with PLSQL. Yeah, so since we are taking this thing as, I mean, in bits, I think we're going to stop there for this particular tutorial. so that tomorrow we'll start that another chapter. And that this particular chapter, I think is chapter what? It's going to be chapter 4, writing executable statements. So I don't know, did I send you guys the document?